Today, Barrett Perlman joins me for round two on the podcast. And much like the first time that she joined me, she just shows up in such a beautiful, honest, vulnerable, and authentic way. Barrett is a coach and a psychedelic guide, and she integrates psychedelics with coaching. And one of the things that I really love about Barrett is her commitment to her own growth and evolution. And in this conversation, we naturally just kind of find ourselves catching up with what we've been up to and the things that have been going on. And for her, she's been navigating a new relationship and what that looks like, approaching it in a conscious way, and what that brought up in her, things for her to work through. And I was also reflecting some of my learnings in relationships of recent. And it's just a beautiful conversation. Now, if you resonate with Barrett and you want to be able to reach out to her, if you're interested in coaching and the psychedelic integration that she offers, the links are going to be in the description below. And also, if you resonate with me and my energy and you're interested in coaching and how I can help guide and support you on your journey of personal growth and self-exploration, and the links to my Instagram and also to schedule a free call will also be in the description. Last thing, if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't yet subscribed, doing that really helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. All right, that's it from me. I hope you enjoy the episode. I guess we're just starting to get into catching up, and we've not actually spoke since, apart from a few messages, but not since March. I think it was March when you were on the first time round. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought before I start asking you how everything's been and what you've been up to and how life has been, I was like, let's just hit record and get into it. But first, again, thank you for being here on a Sunday and for joining me. And I really, really enjoyed our first episode. It was just like a real kind of natural and gentle flow. So I've been looking forward to this one, and it feels nothing like work on a Sunday. It feels soul nourishing. So yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've always loved how our conversations just have this natural, beautiful, self reflective flow to them. You're such a pleasure to speak with. So thank you for having me back.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So what has been alive for you recently, and what's been going on in the life of Barrett?
Well, there's been a lot of medicine work. But also over the last year, I really met this powerful partner. And we've had a lot of ups and downs and pivots and sideways maneuvers, and there's never anyone quite like a partner to illuminate your shadows. And all of the work that I had been doing on myself in the years prior was very conveniently sidestepping doing the work with a partner. I didn't have a partner for the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm.
And so alongside doing a lot of the medicine work, a lot of that has been coming up for me as he and I went from being in a relationship to how we're used to defining relationship, to breaking up, to deciding to be playmates in a way of like thinking of like lion cubs and how they play, and being these two beings that would come together and continuously play, to being in a fluid relationship state, which is much more open and allowing it to sort of be whatever it needs to be in whatever moment that is. And that has certainly come with a lot of challenges. And so, aside from growing my business at the same time and doing the deep internal work, it's like what's really been going on for me a lot these last several months has been looking at my shadows as they're illuminated, and really diving into doing that work and finding a lot of broken programming there. um, Broken programming to the extent of like being so ingrained in what I think a relationship has to look like in order for it to be a successful relationship or one that is fulfilling to me. And inside of that also are the ways in which my brain has been programmed to respond, programmed to act within a partnership, that have really come to light for me as being so broken. And I'm able to identify them as being so broken because when when everything's perfect, everything's great, everything's easy, right? It's like, oh, I'm thinking about you, I'm going to send you this message, I'm going to send you this song. We're interacting in a way that is fulfilling for both parties. Everything's happy, everything's lovely. I'm not worried about any sort of response from him based on something I've said, or um, he's not like taking over the thoughts of my brain. I'm able to easily focus on other things in my life. But when something starts not being perfect, and then we're in a more fluid state at the moment because now he lives in Austin, Texas. I live in Los Angeles, California. And he's not for instance like a phone person. He's never, even when we dated when he lived here, he was never like a good night, good morning kind of guy. He was never like I'm just going to call you randomly and see how you're doing. He's like a very focus driven guy who likes a lot of alone time. And so that can be really challenging after a while. And sitting with the broken patterns that continue to come up of, if I don't get asked how my day is every day, then he must not be that interested in me. And then that's not fulfilling for me. And I think a lot of us can relate to those kinds of programs, those things that we expect in a relationship. Like, I expect to hear from you every day or every other day and connect. Um, but what happens if you don't? And what happens if everything's still okay in the not connecting every day? And to what extent is that still fulfilling for me? And to what extent is that not fulfilling for me? And learning to sort of dance the grace, giving myself the grace around what is actually fulfilling, what is not fulfilling, where is it broken, where do I truly see where I could step up with more unconditional love and have that be authentic for me, and at what points are there parts that actually don't work for me. So that's the brief of my dance lately.
Yeah, wow, there's so much in that. But one of the things that comes up immediately is there is this interesting point of when people are entering into a more of we'll call it a conscious relationship where they're really kind of mindful about how they're actually showing up. There's this area of like, well, uh, uh, maybe a more like less evolved level of relationship is I have my needs and I want you to fulfill my needs. I want you to serve my needs. And if not, then there's a problem. And then it feels like a transition from that is, okay, what is this model of unconditional love where I just allow you to be you? And it's interesting because in that, and it's very subtle. There's a place where it can be, do I actually, in pursuit of that, abandon what actually I deeply desire in partnership? And it's balancing like, well, where's the line between unconditional love and no, actually, I can hold the fact that in my uniqueness, I actually have desire. I actually have desire, and it's okay for those desires to be met. And actually, it's okay to want my partner to see my desires as their needs. And that's one of the things that came up with Mark Gaffney recently that he said, which I thought was really quite beautiful, which is at a certain point in relationship, it's your allurements or your desires are my needs. And if we're both coming from that place, it's not this limerent, I'm trying to do anything to make you happy and I abandon all of my sense of self because I'm empty and I'm broken and I need you. But it's like from my wholeness and through witnessing you as this person that I adore, well, your desires are my needs. So if you desire this, well, I need to do that. And again, and it's subtle. It's almost like there's the idea of thought, and Eckhart Tolle talks about this as thought. Then there's things to put as below thought. So watching TV, maybe just playing video games, alcohol use, drug use, excessive like porn. Those things can put as below thought. Then there's the above thought activity, which meditation. being very present out in nature. So those things can put us above thought. And it feels like there's something similar going on with relationships, where there's like there's the two variations of this, almost like above and below, where I think the two get where they can get mixed up, and they look very similar. They look very similar. Then it's clarifying which is which is a healthy amount of, hey, actually, I have these desires, and it's okay to want my partner to meet those. And by desires, it might mean like I really value someone saying good morning. And is it unreasonable to ask for that? And then we start to look at, well, is it because I feel like I need to because I need it because of this and this, or is it actually no, from a place of wholeness, I just quite like it.
Right. And that's certainly the dance. That's a big dance
Mm,
I've been going through of where is it broken? Where are those and exactly that's a great example of the good morning thing.
mm,
And if I sit with it and I tap into my most honest truth, I like to hear good morning because I like to be thought about. I want to know that
mm,
he's thinking about me. And so if that's my logic, that I want to know that he's thinking about me, that's a very ego driven need. That's not really a need for me that feels rooted in love, especially when the conversation around it is, I think about you all the time. I see this and I think about you. I see that. I think about you. Oh my God, this happened and I thought about you. But that's not always being communicated.
mm,
And so for me to sit with, like, I just want to hear good morning and know he's thinking about me, um, it doesn't feel fully rooted in unconditional love. If but I sort of dance that line as well, where, we've been open, and I've talked to someone else who did check in with me every day and say, "How's your day going? How's this?" And it was like the amount of peace I felt in those interactions was certainly something to look at as well. But it's also had me reflect on things like when a partner wants to go, when you're talking about what do you want to go do, for instance, that night. If it's like one partner wants to go to an ecstatic dance workshop, and the other one wants to go watch like the double feature Oppenheimer Barbie movie, for instance. Like, I don't know if you guys did that in England, but here it was like a back to back double feature, the two movies. And so it perhaps be like, well, which do you want to do? I want to go to ecstatic dance, and he wants to go see the movie double feature. And so then I decide, okay, well, my deepest underlying need, desire, is to spend time with you. And so if that is the thing that's driving my decision, then I'm going to go see the movie instead of the ecstatic dance, because more than the ecstatic dance, I want to spend time with you. And so beginning to listen in and tune into to where are those wants, those needs, those desires, where is it
mm,
yeah, fulfilling a need of another versus a desire of one. I like that Gaffney has sort of that model for looking at the two. And I do think that you're right. When you are in love with someone and you are committed to holding that safe space in a relationship for them to be triggered, for them to be healed, to do their work, to show up with love and support, and they're committed to do the same, then it's a bit more of a commitment to saying, okay, well, if that will make you feel good, it's no skin off my back to take 10 seconds and send a text message or whatnot.
yeah, and yeah, there's this other thing as well, and I've kind of gone through this, so just speaking to some of the thing I've navigated, this idea of the unconditional piece, and it's like, well, it's my ego that wants this, and we do have a tendency to think that the ego is something that we should be abandoned. And it's like, no, it's a part of your humanity. So if you abandon the ego, you're actually rejecting and abandoning just not a part of yourself, it's actually your sense of self. Like is kind of the ego is the identification with thought. So as human, that is part of your humanity. So should we say, well, my egoic needs and what I kind of want and that what feels nice as a human, that doesn't matter anymore? Is that healthy, or is that actually like rejection and abandonment of a piece of ourselves that's going nowhere. And I think that, again, there's like a balance in between, is it that my entire life is in pursuit of fulfilling the desire of my egoic needs, irrespective of anyone else? Because that sounds like it's in the shadow. But if it's, I show up for you and I'm really mindful of your needs, your desires, I want to show up to honor those because I fucking adore you. Is it okay for me to get a little of that return?
Yeah, you're probably right. It is. It is great to get that in return, and certainly unique situations.
Mm,
To be with such a mindful spirit, who can also, our situation is he's really looked at his life and gone, he has some core foundational needs in his life that are not being met, like basic MAB laws, like safety, security. He's recently moved. He doesn't yet have his own apartment, although he's renting one. He has a roof over his head. He's stabilizing his income. He's looking to the future, and he's never been self-employed before. And so that's
mm,
he's 47 years old. So at 47 years old, that's an interesting um, flow for him, having always been able to show up to a job and count on a paycheck. And um, so we are walking this in this fluid relationship part of our time. He's not ready to fully be in a relationship, and he's
sure.
not ready to fully show up and do the work and the commitment and the meet my needs, because his are like, category red right now. He's
Mm,
just constantly in the red, trying to find grounding, trying to find those things. So
mm,
it's an interesting fluidity that has me checking in with myself a lot. And like, if I feel so deeply that this is the person for me, then do I weather the storm? Do I continue to show up as a best friend in a way that is where we are in the fluid state right now is more friends? How does that work? And how,
mm.
yeah, does that even work for me? And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I guess, if you then want it to bring a level of introspection where the question is asked, what am I meant to learn from this? Is there something right now going on that I'm meant to learn that
Mhm.
I that I'm not looking at? And also, how much trust is there in source, in God, in the divine, in that there's a greater plan at work? And I'd say that's been something for me that's been so helpful this year, that's really allowed this year to flow in some of the most like magical ways, is really connecting to this deep belief that everything really is happening as it's meant to. And it might be beyond my level of understanding and comprehension, but there is a wisdom at play here that I know is holding me. And I really feel that more than ever. So I found a recent, as like things have been coming up that I think would have really like affected me more previously, I've really been able to just anchor into this kind of just a knowing of, okay, I might not know exactly what, why, how, but I know this is unfolding, and I know I will look back at some point and it will be, it all makes sense. And that's been quite a powerful practice this year for me, of rather than having to get to the future point to look back, of just having faith right now that it's going that
Mm,
way.
yeah, that's a great surrender, really, right? And trusting in the universe. And it's brought up a lot of those lessons for me as well, alongside how to not lose my authenticity and to really hone in on my tools that keep me aligned in myself, that keep me still continually standing in my power.
Mm,
Because it can feel very disempowering sometimes to constantly be like, Jesus, how many more shadows are going to keep coming up? Like, why are these my shadows? Why does it feel like I'm the only one looking at the shadows and doing this radical exponential work? And I'll say it's been beautiful. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's been challenging, but looking at what happens when we remove labels from things, especially is how we relate to each other. And so if he and I remove this label, how does that change our expectations of each other? How does that allow each of us to be even deeper in our authenticity, knowing that there is a trust and a love and a commitment to being in each other's lives forever? Just may not always be in the wedding ring on the finger kind of way.
Mm.
And in looking at those things too, like looking at my thought patterns of how I would show up in relationships, where if someone has done something that doesn't work for me, why is it that I feel so compelled to get into a feedback loop about it? Why does that become my obsession? Why does that become the only thing that I can look at? And so really making sure that I have the tools to like break those feedback loops, to get back on track, to stay rooted in love, and to continue to move forwards, because also realizing the more that we create that feedback loop in our heads, the more that we're wiring those neurons together, right?
Mm.
And so now if all I'm thinking about for a day is like, oh, I wonder if I'll hear from him because yesterday didn't feel so good, for instance, I don't know. Or, I'm driving out there in a couple days. I apologize in advance for the airplanes all flying overhead. There's like an air show going on here this weekend, and
Okay.
they're overhead. So, my apologies.
You're not in a war zone.
I'm not in a war zone here in Huntington Beach, California, but I'm pretty sure these planes do go to war. So, Um, but so it's been so beautiful to look at my own broken programming as it arises in these challenging situations of like discovering that there were a series of sort of if then statements that would go off in my head. If I don't feel loved by my partner today, then this must not be fulfilling. And instead, learning to allow for a greater bandwidth of time, like I'm an Aries. I love things now. I love to jump off the cliff before looking. I'm just like, let's full speed ahead. And really learning to sit in and check in with the world, and that like the rest of the world isn't like that. Unless they're also a fire sign, which Alex is not. That's just not how most of the world operates. And especially by late 30s, early 40s, many people have been hurt many times and don't have the development that I have, where like love is my tool, love is my weapon, love is the thing that you can shatter my heart and I will rebuild and I will come back and I will love even harder because of it. I don't know that that's always standard for people. There's a lot of resistance people have to getting hurt, and I still see it, and especially people who are not yet like fully waking up, the resistance to that. And it's a shame. And so having more of these tools now that I can help guide people with, because I've witnessed and walked in my own path with them again and again and again, that there are tools that work to get us there, to re-examine that programming, to empower us as we still walk through challenges in interpersonal relationships, really.
Yeah, it's the beautiful thing about people who really are committed to like an evolving evolution or the evolution of their own consciousness in their lifetime, is that especially when you're coaching and you're guiding others, is because you're walking that path all the time. That commitment, it doesn't mean it was something that I used to do. Like I went to university and now I'm done. It's a lifelong pursuit, which means you're forever learning, evolving, discovering those new tools to be able to add value. And it's alive in the when it's alive in the moment for you. It's like there's a transmission that happens in that guidance and coaching because you intimately know it.
Mm, yes, very intimately. And it's been
Mm.
so interesting that is the things that seem to come up the most for my clients. Like, having another client going through the exact same situation with someone in a similar program to what my partner went through, and just learning to walk that now with someone where he's breaking up, but they still want to be best friends, and how to create that space, how to create that bandwidth, how to step out of what was the expectation that this person is my person and step into a new story where the person is your person, but in a different way. And I think it's so interesting how we, at least I, have always been so quick to jump to, is this my person or not my person? And when I was younger, that never used to be my thing. Like, I never looked at a partner as someone who would be my lifelong partner. Like, up until I was about maybe 28 or so, I just looked at everyone like, oh, you'll be fun for a while. Like, maybe we'll get a couple years out of it. That'd be cool. And then it was like, then I started to look at people. I was like, oh, maybe this is why my relationships are failing, because I'm not actually picking partners that I think I would want to spend the rest of my life with. I'm just picking like, you're cool. I'll commit to seeing you and only you. Sounds good. And then when I started to do that, it started to be so much harder to get a person into a relationship. And so then I gave up on it again and just started hanging out with people who were convenient for the time. And I broke, a couple guys' hearts, really, who wanted to marry me. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, this was never supposed to be that. And so that didn't feel good either. And so then I spent 5 years single. And now to be back in on that dating scene and with the intention that I would want someone to be my partner. And realizing the labels that creates and the expectations that creates. And now, based on where I've woken up to, really looking and discovering that there are people that we meet in this world who are our partners, and maybe they are like our soulmate in another life. Maybe they have traditionally been our friend, our ally in this world for so long, so many different lifetimes. And I have seen that in the medicine space with Alex, who I'm in alliance with now. And we have both felt that in those moments of, holy shit, I've known you for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And there's that comfort and that safety and that divine acceptance of each other in full authenticity. But then also being able to step out and go, maybe it's okay if we don't get married someday. Maybe it's okay if I'm blessed to have you in my life for all eternity. And beginning to approach people in that way of, it doesn't have to be forever, but I can still love you unconditionally. And I welcome in anyone who is right for me, anyone who is aligned for my vibration. And I'm starting to see more and more what I call my cosmic tribe really show up in my life. Those people that are doing the deep work that I know are my allies from outside of this realm.
You mentioned authenticity before, and I think it's why it's so important, because when you are being authentic, when you are showing up in your uniqueness, actually the commitment to that allows that space for people that do truly align with you, not a performative version of you, but the actual you. It allows that space for them to see you, to connect with you, and for things to unfold from that place. And something you said then about a new story, that's something I've really been sat in with really deeply since I went to Belgium at Mark Gaffney's mystery school, because the thing that he's really committed to is this new story for humanity, this story of Homo Amor. And the question I ask now almost daily is, how would the new human do this? How would the new human do this? And something I was thinking about recently, and it was just, I like to kind of just be in thought. And one thing that came up is, in the Bible, it says, we were created in the image of God. It also says that God is the creator. So if God is the creator and we were created in the image of God, that means that we are the creator. And the creator of what? Well, we're the creator of our life. And what is our life? It's a story. So we are the creator of our story. So if we really know that we're holding the pen and we get to write the story, what story do I want to write today? And actually, it doesn't matter what story I've been living before now, because that's the old story. Am I ready to cross that out and say, I'm committed to a new story? Now, from that place, there's someone that I met, and I'll probably talk about, well, she'll probably be on the podcast at some point with me. But the thing that we keep talking about is what what does our story look like when it comes to this? What does it look like when it comes to that? What does it like? Let's not assume, because she said to me, what do you like when it comes to X, Y, or Z? And I feel I actually can't answer that because I can't assume that anyone that I've ever been with before now, I can't assume that with you. So I don't want to think, well, here's what I like. Well, how do I know? Because she is entirely unique, and not just unique in a way of we're all unique. She's really fucking unique. So I don't want to assume that I know how anything before now is going to feel with her, because how she shows up is so different to anyone I've ever met. And in her capacity, in her ability, in her devotion, in her adoration, I can't assume that I'm going to feel anyway, because this is a whole new thing. This is a whole new story. So I want to approach it like that with her. And things that in the past that have bothered me simply aren't doing with her. The same thing is like, I'm almost looking around like, this is interesting. This would have bothered me before, and it's not bothering me at all right now. Huh. And that to me is actually, that is honoring the uniqueness of the person, not assuming I know how I'm going to feel with them, because that makes it a very separate dynamic where it's just about me and what I believe I am. But in that union, in that relationship with the person where it is with them, it's everything is unique to them. When she says my name, I feel differently to how I felt compared to how any other person has ever said my name. So just in that, there's a whole new dimension of me that comes online. And what's amazing is that all the teachings of Mark Gaffney and unique self and the things that he talks about there, I'm really living it at the moment. And I think it's been so powerful to take those teachings and implement it into this. But the idea of the new story of, let's not assume I know anything about myself, because in meeting this person, she sees me in ways that I've never seen myself. And I'm actually learning about myself in ways because I'm seeing parts of me that I've never seen, and vice versa. It's a two-way thing. So we're both learning new things about ourselves. So let's not assume the old story. If I'm the creator, if in our we-ness, we are the creator of this story, what fucking story do we want to write? And let's make it a good one.
Yes, like let's make it epic. And I
Yeah.
love, like, it sounds like you and I have so many parallels in what we're going through. Is I would agree. I would say Alex, nothing with him has been like anything that ever came before, anyone who ever came before him. Dating him, from our very first date to continuing how everything continues on, has been just mind-blowingly different. It's like if dating before was in a 3-dimensional reality and dating Alex has been in a 5-dimensional reality. From, he loves to tap into primal instincts, and so we do a lot of like face nuzzling, like cats, right? Like we are much less likely to kiss than we are to like face nuzzle each other. And I never had a partner in the past who ever did that. Um, we are so always like rubbing ourselves on each other, or he's an artist, and so that has been just like a powerful foundation in our relationship too, of him unlocking more creativity in me, but me also seeing in him what he's capable of, and that devotion to him unlocking in him. and allowing him space to heal, because that's what I do. I'm a healing guide, and I'm a facilitator and a shaman, and bringing those parts out in him have allowed for his radical expansion. And so it has been so interesting to experience that every single thing in this has been different from every relationship I've ever tried to have before. And I think that's where it becomes something that I've been willing to sit in the muck in, to really sit in the sacred shit and to not abandon it because the lessons that are coming up feel like they are so directly aligned towards my highest self. And when I tap into my higher consciousness is like, sit with this. You need to learn this. He is teaching you these lessons in a way that only he can say it, so that you will hear it. No one else can say it in a way in which you will hear it except for him right now. And that's powerful. And, like you said, when he says my name, it's different. He's the first person I've ever dated who's called me a goddess. Our nicknames for each other that we use are so rooted in love and so rooted in the things that we do that are so powerful. And I think you also touched on something of getting that clarity around almost like a North Star. And that is something for me that's been coming up a lot in ketamine and cannabis sessions, where I'm noticing, especially because this last trip for me in Peru was in July, and I learned how to teleport, time port, how to go places based on a different skill set than I thought it was going to be. And this was down with Hamilton Souther down in Peru at Blue Morpho. And I had always been trying to visualize in the visual field where it was I wanted to go. Take me to Egypt, take me to see the Arcturians, take me underwater with the orcas. And I was always so disappointed, because even Hamilton was teaching me how to triangulate between the heart and the third eye to go where I wanted. And while we were on this retreat, he said something that really resonated for me, which was that the visual information that you receive on an ayahuasca journey is the least reliable source of information. The most reliable source of information is the knowing that comes from the information you receive. And so there are different senses that we have. There's clairaudience, which is hearing things. There's clairvoyance, which is seeing things like a movie in your head to know them. And my strongest clair sense is claircognizance, which is divine knowing. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, me too, claircognizance. Yeah.
And so when Hamilton said that, I went, holy shit, I've been trying to navigate using I rarely have clairvoyance. So I had been trying to navigate using the least reliable, like, intuition sense for me. And what would happen then if I tapped into my most reliable sense and claircognizance? And I had this massive breakthrough in a journey of going to Egypt and divinely, and knowing ayahuasca guided me to know that I was there. And I was watching my visual field just being, dancing kaleidoscopes of imagery. And I was like, no, Egypt. And as I closed my eyes and I broadcasted from my heart up through the third eye, and instead of triangulating out for the visual field, I triangulated up through my crown, and it essentially put me in Egypt. And I could it was more of like, I almost saw it more behind me than in front of me where my visual field was. And as I began to deeply sit, and now knowing that I was in Egypt, I was at this specific temple, my visual field would slowly begin to match. And that was really powerful for me. And so later in ayahuasca, my last night, I had asked to, have the lessons driven home for me so that I would remember them. And I kept asking to go swim with orcas. I want to swim with orcas. I want to swim with orcas. Bring me the orcas. And finally, 2/3 of the way through ceremony, I'm like, ayahuasca, why? You've been so generous all these nights in ceremony, giving me everything that I've been asking for. Why tonight are you not bringing me orcas? And she was like, do you remember your intention for this ceremony? And I was like, that I wanted you to reaffirm the lessons and stuff. And she was like, yes. And so is there another way that you can take yourself to the orcas if I do not bring them to you. And I went, oh, you taught me that clear cognizance thing, that divine knowing, the time porting, the teleporting. And so I did that. And very quickly then the visual field began to match, which was incredible. And so now I'm continuing to learn this lesson, specifically on ketamine and cannabis journeys, where I'm seeing the visual field, and I've discovered and noticed. And for anyone who's done ketamine, there can be a lot of visuals that come up. And for me, it always felt like being on a ride. Like the closer I would get to an image, the more stabilized it would become, and it would become something that I would then pass through and onwards. But I've started to notice that instead of looking at these visual things and waiting for them to materialize into an agreed upon stabilized image, that was happening because of my own lack of clarity on what the image was. And I'm telling the story because I think it directly relates to manifesting and having clarity in our lives. But I would notice that I would be looking at these images and being like, for instance, okay, I think that's a group of people sitting around a table. And as I'm like, sure. And then it's still kind of changing. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. And I'm watching, but I'm thinking that that's what's there until I finally get close enough that, like, okay, yes, that's definitely a person. And as soon as I would say that's definitely a person, it would become more of a person.
Mm.
And I started to go, okay, what if sooner I went, that's definitely a person? And the sooner I would visualize this, and sometimes again the visual field wasn't matching what I wanted, and so okay, what if I use that same claircognizance and divinely know that that's a person? And I would watch it change into a person much faster than when I simply felt like I was on this ride. And I bring that up because I'm noticing that in my own life, as much as I thought that I had clarity on the things that I wanted in my life, at least for the last couple months, I have felt very much like on this ride, just being pushed and watching and waiting and having a loose idea of what I want, but not really crystal laser clear. And so I've been getting this powerful message through the medicine, this powerful training on what does it really take to get clarity and to get focused on what you want. Yeah. And it is a level of intensity past what I thought it was. And so bringing that in then into our relationships, into our career, into our health, our well-being, into our home setting, into our family, learning to raise that intensity and not just try and visualize it, but for me, trying to divinely know it. And I'm using my hands that's sort of to simulate what would be like the torus field, which, is the circle around us all the time coming out of our energy fields.
The 3-dimensional donuts.
Yes.
That was a beautiful share. And I want to hear more about Peru, June, July, because of course I was planning to be there in June, and then things happened, and I ended up in Vermont at the board meeting with Mark Gaffney and the crew there. And I know that it all played out exactly as it was meant to, and that I'm still going to be in Peru with Hamilton, and I've been doing Hamilton's, I'm in the Blue Morpho Academy and doing the study with him. So everything's still playing out, and it had to go that exact way. Like I really see how it did. But, again, one of the things that Mark so frequently talks about is clarification. And that, what you just said there about getting that clarification. And for me, I would say that really came down to kind of, if I went to solar plexus, it's the clarification of who I am. The clarification of who, not in brokenness, not in I've got all this shadow and I've rejected these parts. But last year I felt like I really went through this profound time of the full reclamation of really like the parts that I'd abandoned, and then feeling just multiple times where I feel just tears of gratitude for being me. Now from that place, now getting the clarification of who I am, then what are my desires that are aligned with the deepest knowing of who I am. And the place that I feel like I've got to is in the clarification of who I am, which presents the clarification of my desire, if that is the direction I move in, I'm just in the space of I welcome everything in my life that is aligned with that. So whatever that is, and I don't know what that is, but I feel like the only thing I need to know is who I am, the clarification of me, the clarification of my desire, and then I have to show up. I have to actually, and from that place of being, I then do, but not just do for the sake of it. It's from this deep alignment with being, and then I just welcome. I welcome whatever comes into my life in whatever quantity, with the deepest trust and knowing that it's going to be the right thing. So yeah, that clarity piece, that clarification piece, is something that I've really been sat with of recent, and it sounds like a beautiful thing to come up. Especially again, if you were trying to do this visual piece, the clairvoyance, but actually cognizance. And again, for me, reflecting back, that is something I get where sometimes things come up, and or often, very often, things come up, and I know, and it's like I just know, I know. And if someone said, "What? How do you know?" I'm like, I don't know, but I know, I know.
Right. That's the interesting part about clear cognizance is it's sort of like the not like the rarest one, but it kind of is pretty rare to have just a knowing without a visual or a sound or a smell that went with it. And there is just that weird like, I don't know, but I know this thing that I shouldn't know all of a sudden.
And it's almost knowing it as though it's already happened. I kind of get that. Like, you know, if something just happened, you know it happens. Or how do you know? Well, I know. And it's a similar type of thing that I get in that way. But yeah, that clarification and how that transfers over, and just what you were saying about the relationships. Yeah, I feel like getting that clarity, and not just the clarity of me and the clarity of other, but what's the clarity of we? Can we find that as well? Because obviously, when we come together, we create a whole new thing. It's like the two parts create something new, and it's not just me, you separate. In our union, actually, it's there's a new thing that's formed. So, in that new thing that's formed, what's the clarification of the desire of we? That includes the desire of me. That includes the desire of other. But then as they come together, this new thing that's created, what's the clarified desire of that new thing?
Mm, it's powerful. It's so powerful. And having those conversations around it to get that clarity, to find that alignment, and being able to navigate those with love, with an open heart, and being able to sit with when there's a misalignment, and what do you do about the misalignment. um, yeah, that's been an interesting thing that Alex has always brought up is the misalignment, and he has this ship analogy of, look, the ships get 1 degree off course, then eventually they're not going to the same place anymore. And seeking to find those misaligning points early on and discuss them early on to see if they can be brought more into alignment. And yeah, that's been not my favorite analogy. Not my favorite thing to work with.
Yeah, and I guess there's some kind of practical realism in the idea that yeah, if we're slightly out and we keep going slightly out, eventually where do we end up? It doesn't mean there can't be a course correction, but it might mean there needs to be a bigger course correction that that takes place. But
And identifying how your ship's cruise, right? Like he's a very slow moving ship. He likes to think about things for a long time before he'll really implement a lot of action. So like moving to Austin took him 5 years. Once he decided he wanted to do it, it really took him 5 years. Um, and that's just more of like a Pisces nature. It's more water, it's more fluid. It's um, whereas I'm an Aries, and I keep bringing that back up. But like I have 6 fire signs in my chart. I am so full of combustibility that my ship tends to be like, oh, well, okay, well, you're going that way. I'm going to go over here and then I'm going to come back and then I'm going to actually go backwards for a little bit and then I'm going to check out that island over here and then I'm going to cruise back and I'm going to be in alignment with you. I'll meet up with you here, and that can just be discombobulating for someone. And acknowledging that and watching how we've worked together to bring ships more into alignment has been really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to be gentle and tender in that whole process, because especially if people are well-meaning, kind, benevolent, it's almost kind of give that grace of, okay, I know we're both well-intentioned and we're trying to navigate this, and having that gentleness and tenderness to kind of, because it's something that's really serious, but then also can we have the moments where we hold it lighter with more trust and faith, and remember to also enjoy it, because I think sometimes people can make their relationship their life mission, where it's actually they kind of abandon other things and that North Star, and actually the relationship becomes the North Star, and then you can kind of get lost and consumed in it, and then in that consumption you can forget the joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, so for me, it's been interesting seeing that was a lot of my old programming was abandon everything else and the relationship becomes the North Star.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy in my opinion. So for me, there've been a lot of lessons around how do I still stay focused on my mission and not let this relationship take over my life. The looking at my shadows for the sake of relationship take over my life. And that's been interesting and something I'm still continuously like, where did I get that programming from? Where was it implanted in me to latch so hard onto making love work at all costs, or that, and I am love. I am a being of love. I work with love. It is my tool. It is my weapon. It is all the things. And just trying to identify, is that the reason that it's like love at all costs? Because there will be other love. Like he's not the end all be all love. There's love everywhere. There's love from within. There's love from my community. There's love from my family. There's so much love. Yeah, that's something I'm really digging into. Of where did that come from?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because I think again sometimes, and this is the paradox of all of this we have to be able to hold, is that everything's true but partial,
Mm.
and sure it may have been created at some point, maybe not in this life,
Great fucking point.
right? And you can be look like, well, was it when I was 8, or was it that thing? And you go and maybe you never find it, and actually maybe it's just the fucking essence of who you are, and it's nothing that needs correcting. It can actually be celebrated, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think we have that. It's like, oh, I get all this emotion around that thing, and yes, sometimes it is something that needs addressing, and like, hey, let's maybe rework that a little bit. But sometimes it's no, actually, it's the essence of who I am. Like in the deepest depths of my soul, it's who I am, and to not be that feels like a violation of my soul,
Fuck yeah.
right? So I had this awareness at mystery school, and it was really profound. I was like, wow. And it was like really nothing to do with what was going on there. It just happened to come through. I mean, it was something to do with what was going on there, but it wasn't like front and center of the what was being spoken about. It just something that came up. Part of my story as to why I always feel the need to look after someone, or be close, or to spot what's going on and to help heal. Part of my story that I held on to until a few weeks ago was a large part of that was born out of, so when I was 17, my dad was really going through a dark night of the soul. He attempted suicide several times. And, I'd come home one time and he was unconscious from taking an overdose. There was another time where I woke up at like 3 in the morning and I'd gone to the toilet and I heard him crying and I went downstairs and he was sat in the kitchen and he was, had a carving knife to his wrists and I just sat with him and I just knew how to guide the conversation in the way that a coach or a therapist would. I just knew how to do it. And I just sat with him and I just kind of went into what was going on and I just guided him through it. And part of my story was that the reason I show up the way I do now is because of that. And I had a fucking realization a few weeks ago. That is not the case. That's not true. The reason that I was the one that showed up to my dad like that and it wasn't my mum or it wasn't my brother is because that's the fucking essence of who I am. This now isn't a result of that. How I showed up then is a result of who I am. And it's not, oh, I show up in this way where I feel like I need to look after people and I care for people and I love people because I went through this traumatic thing. Fuck no. I showed up that way and I was the only one that showed up that way then because of who I am.
That is so powerful.
And how often do we think this essence of who I am is something that must be a result of something that was broken and I've got to fix it?
Yeah, all the time. Have you stumbled into gene keys?
I am familiar with it. I've got friends that are really into it, and I've not gone deeply into it myself, so I know of it. I can't say I know about it.
Okay, I'm like only like one step ahead of you, which is
Mhm.
that I've looked up my gene keys and I've read the briefness that they'll give you for free. And what you're saying hits so close to home because in the gene keys, essentially my North Star and my life purpose is unconditional love. And and I remember looking at my profile and being like, well, come on, like whose isn't unconditional love? Like how could everyone's sole purpose not be unconditional love? And so I looked up Alex's chart and sure enough, his sole purpose, truth guiding North Star was truth. And nowhere was unconditional. And I got to actually compare and really resonate with and see where in my chart it was very much about love and figuring out the ways to break through to unconditional love, to share that unconditional love, and in what ways it was a very actually relevant map to my path, and I could relate to things that I had already done and the things that I was already doing as they were showing you how to unlock those things. And I was like, wow, very interesting and powerful. And then looked at his chart and saw, wow, oh, no wonder we're having this friction. And he
Mm,
says the things that he does, I can see based on his chart where he is created to be this different person who is more about spreading information, spreading knowledge, being on the mission, and following his life's purpose is like paramount. Being of service is paramount in his
mm,
life, where for me, loving and sharing love and helping people love is paramount. And
mm,
so I think that you are absolutely spot on in I love that you identified that in yourself as that's just who you are, and perhaps that was the first instance of it really being brought out in you. And I can reflect also on shit. I am just made of so much love that, of course, it's the thing that I think about. It's the thing that feels the most important to me. That when it is threatened, I become obsessed with how not to lose it.
And then imagine spending like years of your life trying to figure out like why am I this way? I'm not meant to be like this. How do I fix it?
Mm,
Or where did this begin? That's your sole purpose. It's like, wow.
so it makes me want to get more into gene keys of like shit. There's something here.
And I think all of these things, they're all they're all fingers that are pointing at the moon, and none of them are the moon. And it's like, to me, it's kind of like, like all roads lead to Rome. And it's like all of these different things. I think the thing it points to is that its source is God, and that we are a God is in, through, and as us. We are a creation of that. Like the amount of mysteries that are in that, and we could spend really the rest of our lives trying to figure out the mysteries. And I think part of my like allurement, part of my desire is to spend the rest of my life going into the mysteries. But I'm gonna scratch the surface. And there are some things that I'll never discover. But outside of the intricacies of all the mysteries, I feel like it's just we are that unique configuration of the divine. And it's like, can we actually hold the miracle that is in our uniqueness, and just celebrate it with the deepest bow of gratitude and reverence for who and what we are, and just allow ourselves to show up fully that way.
Yes, please. Yes, please. And it's one of those things you notice that the more you are in your authentic alignment, the more what's meant for you comes into your life easily. The more that you have that clarity on what it is that makes you you, and the more that you know where your integrity lies, and you make those decisions consciously and you make quick decisions, and the faster and more readily and more abundantly that life surrounds you.
Mm.
And so it's my favorite thing to help people with, is to get into that authentic alignment, and to use also the psychedelic medicines to help us rediscover that connection to source, that connection to authenticity that they blast the doors wide open on.
Mm. Yeah, tell us more about that, because I'm doing the study with Hamilton to for like psychedelic sitter and coach, and I know that's called to me for a long time. So I feel deeply grateful to be in that, and I know that you have a really deep relationship with Hamilton, and you've been to Blue Morpho. So, like, tell me more about what that looks like for you as a facilitator of the kind of the psychedelic ceremony and coaching, and how that looks when they're integrated.
Yeah, well, for starters, anyone who's interested in ayahuasca, Blue Morpho is the place to go. I can't speak highly enough of Hamilton, and how synchronistically he came into my life was just unreal. So that being said, I think that there's something really different about coaching with psychedelics, and the need to have a coach or facilitator or mentor who has been to those depths in order to sort of coach you around what you've seen there. I think that's really powerful and important. Knowing that you can be held by someone who knows more than you, right? It's like you don't go to school to learn from a teacher who just looked at the textbook yesterday. You go to learn from someone who has a deep foundational understanding of what it is that you're experiencing. And so I work with clients sort of in all ranges of the spectrum, but what they have in common is that they are looking to heal, and in healing, tap into the deepest parts of their authenticity to get more aligned in who they are. And so I work with clients right now one on one, and in that we have a psychedelic ceremony alongside powerful transformational life coaching. So really preparing and looking at the life and analyzing where are the areas that need to be more illuminated, bringing a refined intention into ceremony. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes we can have these bold intentions of, I want to go back to my 7-year-old self and heal that trauma that was inflicted on me then. That can be an intention that someone sets. And depending on the medicine, that may be a fine intention. I would say that's a more realistic intention for ayahuasca than perhaps mushrooms. But depending on what work if you're going to be guided through your whole ceremony on mushrooms, that could be a very realistic intention. But intention refinement is asking, a few layers deep on the why of that. So if you heal the trauma of the 7-year-old self, what is it that you'll have of value then that you didn't have before? And that could be a sense of peace. If you have a sense of peace, then what does that give you of value that you didn't have before? And that could be freedom, right? And you may not always need to go 5 layers deep, but you're looking to really boil it down to a one-word emotion. And oftentimes people boil down to freedom or wisdom or love or self-love. And so now you can go into a ceremony with one clear intention, knowing that that is what you are hoping to get out of it. And so then the ceremony gets to unfold in whatever way to realize that. And so that's really powerful. Sometimes for me, that's a lot of talk and guiding people through talk of inner child work, of working with themselves in the mirror and doing sort of enoughness practices and integrating those parts of them into themselves. Sometimes that's shamanic work. Sometimes that's helping release karmic ties on someone and bringing out something that has been so deeply locked up. For instance, someone's ability to speak their truth, and helping them let go of all of the thousands of years of repression in their family line with something like that. And so the work is it's my absolute favorite to dig into with people, because you get to walk the whole spectrum, but it takes being deeply rooted in the ability to know that I can help you navigate your mindset, know that I can help you release the darkness of the shadows within you in a shamanic capacity, knowing that I can also protect you from whatever may try to enter that shouldn't be entering, because we're in sanctuary anyways. But if something comes up, that you are well taken care of, and someone who can also regulate your nervous system and do those important things that allow for someone to be so safely held in a container that they can really do the work. And in digging into those parts of us that hold pain, that hold repression, we get to illuminate them, and we get to heal them. We get to invite them to be parts of our story, not the story. We get to learn the messages and we get to grow from them. And that is just so incredibly powerful. And I've been personally very called to work with mushrooms. That is my psychedelic medicine of choice to facilitate. I've started to dabble into a couple others that I've been doing deep dive studies with, like ketamine and bufo. But primarily psilocybin is, I think, just the biggest healing medicine that we have available to us on this planet that most people will have access to.
And for people that haven't experienced any psychedelics, but maybe let's just say mushrooms for now, what is the difference between having the type of coaching that they can experience without the psychedelics versus the experience of when they use the psychedelic, mushrooms specifically?
So when you are on mushrooms specifically, your brain is more neuroplastic. So what that means is it's more open to receiving new information and wiring that into the hard drive. It actually increases the strength of neural pathways by 10%. So not only does it connect neurons in new places, but it makes them even stronger than they were before. And so what happens is in the medicine, you sort of also turn the ego dial down. There's less resistance to receiving new information. And then you're really wiring that stuff in. So on the medicine, getting those new ideas, your brain is so much more open to receiving them and then really locking that in. So it can do the work much faster than without the medicine. And so, to be clear, not all of my sessions are on psychedelics. There's a lot of work and integration off the medicine as well. But that it really lays the groundwork for rapid, radical change in your life.
Yeah, yeah. From my experience or how I'd explain it is kind of there's that lifting of the veil, which allows for a more clear picture of what's actually going on outside of my. Usually, we have a distorted lens of how we see things. We can only see it from this single perspective, and you think about how vast consciousness is and the amount of viewpoints of consciousness, well, I'm seeing it from one. So what are the other things that could be going on? And it feels to me like psychedelics allow for that broadening of a bigger picture. And then to your point, one of the things that I think is missing, and I know it's one of the things that you um, deliver, is the integration. And the integration is so important because people can have these really profound experiences where then after they're kind of left to their own devices. But having the session and then having the coaching after to integrate it is one of the things that I think is so important.
Because oftentimes there's subtle messages that come up, and in the medicine, everything can feel great. It can feel heart open. It can feel so connected. It can, especially working with me, I invite a lot of play into our sessions, invite a lot of laughter. I think healing and laughter go so hand in hand and very important. And I bring those both in. And so when people leave, they're like, they can be on this high of what they experienced. And that can diminish quickly or it can diminish slowly, but really learning how to bring those things into your everyday life. For instance, I had a client recently who forgot to tell me that one of his big intentions going into ceremony was that he wanted to find more play in his life. Through our previous discussions, it never came up, but it came up in ceremony. And he went, "Oh my God, I forgot to tell you that this was something going on in my life." And we established this beautiful foundation of play. And the integration work after that was all of the ways in which you can find play in your life. And he was like, "Well, yeah, I guess I could take my dog to the dog park more often and play with her there." And I'm like, "Okay, but let's distinguish now between fun and play, because play is an actual energy that you can lace into your entire day. Like,
Yeah.
play is how you can open the car door. Play is how you walk down the street. Play is the way that you interact with the cashier checking you out at the grocery store. Play is teasing your dog with food before you make them sit and do a trick for a treat. There's so many ways to invite play in that I think we lose track of all the time. And so doing the work after that to really lock in, okay, what did you do to play this week? Did you make play too complicated? Did you again think that it had to be taking the dog on this massive hike out somewhere and to have this giant moment of play? Did you really find all of the play available to you
Mm.
within each day?
I love that. I love that. And it's I really, as a non-Christian, I just fucking love like all the teachings of Jesus.
Mm.
Um, and entering the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like little children. And if you observe children, like they don't like, oh, I've got to go to this thing to play. They tend to just be so often playful until they're told not to. But their natural state is play,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, we're going to do this, we're going to play as we do it. And it's like, yeah, like how do we like do the chores around the house and play whilst we do it?
Totally. Totally. It'll change your life, right? Like, how do you make doing the dishes fun?
Mm.
And sometimes it's like I can hear the argument from people in my head right now. There's nothing fun about doing the dishes. And I was like, well, then you have to seek that fun out, don't you? And perhaps it's showing up with a different attitude, a different perspective. And it goes right along with all of the work on psychedelics, all of the work on reprogramming your brain. But instead, what if you walk up to do the dishes and say, I enjoy doing the dishes because I love taking care of my home? That's a whole different mindset than, oh, I can't believe that there's 5 dishes piled up again and I have to when is someone else ever going to do the dishes?
Mm.
It's a different
Yeah.
mindset. And so showing up with that new mindset and repeating it every time that you do begins to again re-solidify that in your brain, wire those neural pathways together that perhaps doing the dishes is fun. Perhaps there's a way in which you can scrape the food that's going to make you giggle. And my goodness, didn't doing the dishes just become pretty fun?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And you are looking to, are you just starting the online ceremonies?
So, yeah, that's available to all of my clients in general, but I'm launching a group program soon that will also have a virtual ceremony. And that is really exciting for me because not everyone can fly across the country or across the world to be with me. But I am such a believer in mushrooms and creating a safe set and setting that there's a way to do that virtually as well. And in making sure that everyone has created that safe set and setting in their home, guiding them into taking the mushrooms, setting the intentions, setting the boundaries of safety in their own home and within the group, and then also continuing to stay online to support people if they have things that come up, and being able to address that with them while they're still anywhere in the world. Very
Yeah, that's
powerful.
beautiful because there are so many people that are now trying mushrooms and trying psychedelics. So to be able to have that option to be in the presence of someone virtually, if they're going to do it anyway, but now they can actually do it with someone who is experienced to help guide, to help process, it's it's an amazing thing. So for people that are interested in that, what's the best way for them to go about getting in contact or for finding you?
I'm very findable on Instagram at Barrett Perlman. Also, barrettperlman.com. There's a bunch of information there on how to get in touch with me. And yeah, I use Facebook, but not so much. So, Instagram is my primary platform. Great way to get in touch with me there. And I would be happy to discuss if I can support you and what that would look like.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and it was great to catch up. And thank you for sharing and showing up so honestly and authentically. And the way in which you do that, I think there's so much teaching and medicine in your honesty and vulnerability and authenticity. Outside of how you coach people, just actually in your being, it's happening. So it's beautiful to witness that and to share the space.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you as well, your presence is a joy. And I love how vulnerable you show up as well. And the conversations that you're having and the information that you're sharing is just so important. And I honor your journey and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Until the next one.